Thank you for joining us, everyone. This is Liberty. It's good to see you, or hear you. Well, not even hear you. In this episode of LOP Radio, we are going to discuss the American surveillance state. And we might move into some other topics afterwards. We're going to see what direction the show goes. I've got a brief presentation in which I'll outline some of the history of electronic surveillance, some of the things that are happening currently, and what potentially could be happening in the future. So to start that off, some of the history of electronic surveillance. What we're talking about primarily, these are phone calls, emails, text messages later on, things like that as the technology developed. One of the earliest systems that we had in place that we know about, and this is actually a few generations past, and we'll get to that. It was called Carnivore. It was, and this is some information from Wikipedia. I'll try and post some of the links in the thread and in the video description of the archive that we keep on YouTube of our broadcasts. The software was called Carnivore. It was later renamed to DCS 1000. The system was implemented by the Federal Bureau of Investigation that was designed to monitor email and electronic communications. It used a customizable packet sniffer that can monitor all of the target's internet traffic. Carnivore was implemented in October of 1997. Now, if you're not aware of what a packet sniffer is, it basically intercepts packets of information that are relayed across the internet. These are every piece of information that you send. It's got a small, a little bit of information in the front that tells the computer where it's going, where it's coming from. It's got simple commands like acknowledge, send, receive, put, all these different kinds of commands, and it also encapsulates the information that you're sending. When you use encryption technology, basically most of that information is wrapped in what's known as a secure socket layer. And what that is basically it's a secured connection from your browser to the server that you're sending information to. And that encryption that's along there prevents things like what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack. And what that is basically someone sets up shop between your computer and the server, and they intercept all the information coming and going through that connection. The secured socket layer, which involves the encryption, makes that interception worthless because the information that they have, there are keys that are handed back and forth between the server and your computer's connection, and without those keys, it's very difficult to crack the encryption, though it's not impossible. And given the budget that some of these agencies have, I'm sure it wouldn't be difficult for them to put together, megalithic-sized computers to be able to crunch those numbers out. But as technology progresses, the encryption progresses, and it's basically a numbers game to dissuade someone from attempting it, because it would take years or months or whatever to crack that data, and you're not even sure if the data is worth anything. So to continue with the presentation, and again, this is information coming from Wikipedia. The development of the Carnivore system, it grew out of an earlier FBI project called Omnivore, which itself replaced an older surveillance tool migrated from the U.S. Navy by FBI Director of Integrity and Compliance Patrick Kelly. We still don't know the name of that tool. It's obviously confidential for some reason. So what we've got here is Carnivore being the third iteration of electronic communication capturing. So this is, and that was implemented in October of 1997. And I don't know about you guys, the internet kind of seems like it took off, early 90s. That's about the time that I got into it. So we're already, several years into when it kind of started going mainstream. They're already on their third iteration of the electronic surveillance tools, which is a little discerning. Now, there was a controversy surrounding this program and the software. In July of 2000, the Electronic Frontier Foundation submitted a statement to the subcommittees on the Constitution of the Committee on Judiciary in the United States House of Representatives, detailing the dangers of a system. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation is kind of an advocacy group that, as our internet life takes off, they keep an eye on who's doing what and basically trying to make sure that our internet freedoms aren't infringed upon by various corporations or governmental agencies. So they're kind of the good guy in this fight. And they weren't happy with finding out that there was first of all, a tool named Carnivore that was chewing through our messages and saving them, but also that it was pretty much under the radar. Yeah, I didn't hear about Carnivore until I think I read an article about it probably after '97, probably after I'm sure it had been in use for a couple of years. I read about it in a book called The Database Nation, which outlined some of the security risks that netizens were faced with by the various forms of electronic surveillance, basically what we're talking about today. It's a good book. I suggest reading it. At this point, it's rather dated, obviously, because one of the major keystones of this operation was the implementation of the Patriot Act after the 9/11 tragedy. Before that, investigators still needed a warrant to be able to intercept communications, so this was more on an individual person type of basis, so kind of like a search warrant. They would need to go to a judge to give evidence or suspicion that this person needed to be monitored. The judge would issue a warrant, and they would be able to use that warrant, kind of like wiretapping, searches on the house and stuff like that, like it's performed in real life. They were able to implement that in the electronic world. So the Patriot Act was basically when it went from targeted, individuals that needed a warrant to they could basically do the mass scale metadata collection that we know of today. So the FBI director, Donald Kerr, was quoted as saying, this is directly after the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, submitted this statement. The Carnivore device works like a commercial sniffer, and I've already explained what a sniffer is, a packet sniffer. To continue, like a commercial sniffer and other networks diagnostic tools used by ISPs, internet service providers, of course, every day, except that it provides the FBI with a unique ability to distinguish between communications which may be lawfully intercepted and those which may not. For example, if a court order provides for a lawful interception of a type of communication, i.e. email, but excludes all other communications, such as online shopping, the Carnivore tool can be configured to intercept only those emails being transmitted either to or from the named subject, end quote. So as you can see, he mentions a court order in this instance, which was the system before the Patriot Act, and I guess the advantage to using the Carnivore system was they were able to configure it to intercept just the emails and only communication emails, and they were able to find a distinction between that and various other online activities like shopping. So after the Patriot Act, they updated their wares, and they got into a different program. And here's to continue with the Wikipedia article. The Associated Press reported in mid-January 2005 that the FBI essentially abandoned the use of Carnivore in 2001. Of course, that's when the Patriot Act went into effect. in favor of commercially available software such as Narus Insight, a mass surveillance system. A report in 2007 described the successor system as being located inside an internet provider's network at the junction point of a router or network switch, and capable of indiscriminately storing data flowing through the provider's network. So that's the man-in-the-middle attack that I discussed earlier. This is where they implement a piece of software between you and who you're communicating with, and they did this through the internet service providers by installing a router or a switcher that had the capability of grabbing all of those packets and storing them en masse. So they mentioned an example of commercial software that they use, the Narus Insight. And Narus Insight is a very interesting tool, and it comes from an interesting company, and there are some things that while I was reading this, some red flags went off, and I'd like to share that with you also. Now, Narus Insight, the tool, was created by Narus Inc., which is a subsidiary of Boeing, and of course the aviation and various military application corporation. The funding for Narus was provided by a venture from companies including J.P. Morgan Partners and various other people. So you've got J.P. Morgan putting in some of the initial funds for this operation to take off. Now, Narus had several business partners providing technologies similar to Narus Insight. Several of the partners were funded by InQtel, and this is from the Wikipedia article. That's IN-Q-TEL. Now, some research on InQtel will expose something that made me nervous, and I've seen this before in some other research that I've done. Of course, this is all happening across many different countries, implemented by all the various intelligence gathering and intelligence agencies. This was kind of the switch from a stakeout parked in front of your house, keeping an eye on you, to where they would be able to institute much more granular, much more detailed information with much less manpower. So it was they were able to cast not only a wider net, but it was less expensive because it wasn't 3 or 4 or 5, a team of 5 people that were focused on 1 or 2 targets. This was a team of 1 or 2 people that could monitor tens, possibly hundreds, and as we'll see later on in this presentation, substantially more people than that. So InQtel of Arlington, Virginia, United States, is a not-for-profit venture capitalist firm that invests in high-tech companies for the sole purpose of keeping the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies equipped with the latest in information technology in support of the United States intelligence capability. So this InQtel is a not-for-profit company that is run by the CIA. I found that disturbing, to be honest with you. This is them not only dealing in what is effectively supposed to be foreign affairs, foreign spying, foreign activities, but now here's them investing that money, that they have in domestic companies with interests that they have in various technologies that, of course, will be implemented in one way or another. The CIA, as far as I know, is legally bound to only do their activities outside of the USA. Of course, the FBI and the NSA are the agencies that are allowed to do it within the domestic borders. So, of course, they're all working hand in hand in this. Here's some more information that might surprise you. InQtel sold 5,636 shares of Google worth over $2.2 million on November 15, 2005. The stocks were a result of Google's acquisition of Keyhole, the CIA-funded satellite mapping software now known as Google Earth. So the Google Earth that we use and love so much is started its life as a CIA operation, intelligence gathering from that agency, which I'm sure some of you dedicated researchers already knew. I had heard rumblings about it, but of course they were confirmed by this Wikipedia article that I'm reading to you now. Moving on, as of August 2006, In-Q-Tel had reviewed more than 5,800 business plans, invested some $150 million in more than 90 companies, and delivered more than 130 technology solutions to the intelligence community. Pardon me. In 2005, it was said to be funded with about $37 million a year from the CIA. So they diversified from intelligence gathering into venture capitalism and funding various operations in the tech sector that they thought might behoove them in their, to give, business plan ideas, to steer companies in a direction if it's something that was interesting to them and might help them in the future. So for the last almost 10 years, much of our technology has probably been overseen by the CIA, which, of course, if you're an American, you are more than familiar with much of our industry being dominated by the military-industrial complex, which, of course, several presidents have warned us about. But now we can see that not only is that manufacturing and various, the $700+ billion a year that we spend on defense, on the technological front, that the CIA is directly involved in steering the direction of our electronic communication and various other software applications. And as a matter of fact, if you go to the link at the Wikipedia article for In-Q-Tel, which is wikipedia.org/wiki/in-q as in Quincy-TEL, there's a laundry list of the various software companies that they've been involved with, and the type of software and other products that they've been involved in manufacturing. So some of those things in the software list that the CIA has been funding and steering and helping with business plans and various other avenues of influence are games, first-person shooter training simulators, social media monitoring, crowdsourcing websites, and this one's a little spooky, web intelligence and predictive analytics. And the predictive analytics is, through the entire list, that was one of the most disturbing things that I read, and I'll get into that later, and I've got some speculation on what these guys are up to and why they need this data. Some of the other things that they're involved in, for instance, in the biotech field, DNA fingerprints, nanobioprocessors, and hardware that transmits sound via the teeth. That's odd to me. I find that strange. This is almost getting off into woo land, with why do they need devices that transmit sounds via teeth? Is this for agents, to be able to sneak a wire or a bug into a meeting or something like that? Or is this, getting into the woo, is this to be installed in some unwitting target that they're keeping an eye on? That goes into a bit of the transhumanism, and it definitely seems to be overstepping the boundaries of what an intelligence agency should be up to. So one of my concerns is what seems to have happened, and we've seen this in the past, much of what seems to be troubling America and probably several other countries, though I can't speak to that because, of course, I don't live there. Some of the things, for instance, that were developed in World War II, they had a very successful propaganda machine that that they used on America to get us. We were very much opposed to any type of intervention in World War II. Of course, this was before Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, but they instituted a propaganda campaign, and this was all the thought child of one Edward Bernays, who, if you do some research on that fellow, you'll find some very scary and damning evidence of why America is in some of the sad state of affairs that it's in today. But basically, for instance, the fluoride that's in our water system, that was the brainchild of Edward Bernays, as well as the Liberty Sticks, which was the campaign to get women to start smoking back in the early part of the 1900s. So the connection here, before I digress too far, is these are systems that were used in the battlefield and at wartime that were developed, at the military level, more or less. And after the war, Bernays kind of repackaged that system, and he literally wrote a book called Propaganda, and it's all about crowd mob mentality and being able to control, the consensus of reality and things like that. He was the creator of the modern advertising movement. So he went from using propaganda, against the Nazis or for the Nazis. I'm not sure where the line was drawn with that, to be honest with you, but using military propaganda. After the war, it was such an effective tool, they switched it over to the private sector commercially, and they called it advertising. And that's probably one of the worst things that they've done to the American people, but that's for another show. That's a bit broad for the scope of this discussion. So my fear is wartime tactics being used domestically and also being used commercially. So again, this is the CIA. They are legally prevented from being able to do different operations within the American away, in domestically in America, but the FBI, NSA are able to do that. They are conscripted. They're allowed to do that. So this article is from firstlook.org. You may be familiar with it. This is Glenn Greenwald's news website, and it's been used to disseminate information from the whistleblower Edward Snowden. And this is kind of how the information is being presented to the American people now, I guess under a controlled environment rather than relying on, Guardian and, various newspapers around the world. The article, the title is "The NSA's Secret Role in the U.S. Assassination Program." And this is a foreign operation that the NSA used their various data collection techniques to influence what was effectively an assassination program, I guess, against what they would consider, terrorist targets, under our wonderful banner of the war against terror. And how you can wage a war against a guerrilla tactic, I'm not sure if I understand, but here we are. Here's the article. According to a former drone operator for the military's Joint Special Operations Command, who also worked with the NSA, the agency often identified targets based on conversational metadata analysis and cell phone tracking technologies. Rather than confirming a target's identity with operatives or informants on the ground, the CIA or the U.S. military then orders a strike based on the activity and location of a mobile phone a person is believed to be using. That's scary. That's they don't have people saying, I see the target, here's the coordinates, I can verify that that's what this person is. It's basically, here is this terrorist's cell phone, we're going to track them by this data. And hopefully he didn't give it to his mom that day, hopefully it didn't get stolen, well maybe, I don't know. You know, if it did get stolen, then it would be a thief and, you know, whatever. I'm not sure they deserve death, but hey. So that's probably not a great tactic, and they've come under fire for it, and that's of course why it's in the firstlook.org is it's being critical of it, and this information is brought to us, I believe, by Edward Snowden. The article goes on to say, while researching this topic, I found a presentation regarding a similar issue in India. Oh, no, wait, this is my... I'm reading my notes here, folks. Unfortunately, it's in Notepad, so I don't have any great ways to distinguish what's from the articles and what's my personal notes. So actually, while I was researching this topic, I found a presentation from a fellow in India, and they've basically instituted the same system out there that we have here, bundled under a similar Patriot Act as a result of a similar India's 9/11, which I was, to be honest with you, unaware that they had even had one. So the presentation is about an hour long. It's by, you know, a geek, a technical guy, and it's really well thought out, really well researched, and really well presented. So I'd like to reiterate some of those points, and I'll try to provide a link to this presentation in the video description of our archives on YouTube. The video presentation describes myths. One of these being, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Well, this is a typical law enforcement mantra that, of course, is disturbing and goes against everything that the Constitution is there to protect. You know, basically saying if you're not a terrorist and you've got nothing to worry about, just let us dig through your information and you'll be fine. Of course, who makes the distinction of who's a terrorist and who's a political activist and you know, basically what, you know, how those things are handled, you know, that's up to whoever's, you know, in charge of that with whatever oversight they've got from the government. And knowing our government, I wouldn't let them watch my cat at this point, so I'm definitely not sure if I want them involved in collecting my data and securing it. So it goes on to point out another myth, no one cares about security, and that's interesting. The concept here is that basically that people will openly share intimate details of their life with a complete stranger, you know, on the street, given the opportunity. Like you might be sitting next to someone on a train, or, which was the example that they used, you might be standing next to somebody in line at the grocery store, and they'll say, you know, hey, do you have any kids? Oh, that's interesting. You know, where do you work? You know, how much money do you make? These types of conversations come up, and given the anonymity of the relationship, I think most people are pretty comfortable sharing some of that. At least here in Texas, people are pretty open and you know, ready to talk about things. You know, of course, we don't think about it. I don't think about it necessarily under the context of people collecting data, you know, to be used against me at a later time, or, you know, to somehow convict myself of you know, some horrible whatever. So the point to that myth is that you really shouldn't be worried about us collecting your data. You'd be willing to share it with a complete stranger anyway. Which I think as we move further into the information age and we begin to see how this isn't, you know, your nice neighbor from next door that's just making chit-chat. This is an intelligence agency that is gathering information that could be used to convict you of something, that could be used to create a profile and use some type of crazy behavior prediction software that may or may not work and not be as effective as, you know, 5 or 6 people that have a warrant to target someone, and granularly checking information between the different people, like it was prior to the Patriot Act. So they also have a constitution in India, and part of his objection to this surveillance was it could be paralleled through our Constitution, and specifically concerning the Fifth Amendment and bearing witness against yourself when you're when you're arrested for a crime. Of course, everyone's familiar with the phrase "I plead the Fifth," and that's there because the Constitution provides it recognizes your right to not have to bear witness against yourself in a case of law. So, as your metadata is collected en masse through this electric surveillance system, and the way they kind of skate it in the Patriot Act is that what they do is they don't look at the data until you've been identified as a possible suspect. So what they'll do is they'll capture all the information that comes from your computer and their little man-in-the-middle attack that they use through the internet service provider through a router that they've got installed that just pumps all this data to a data storage center in Utah or wherever they've got one. And they just store it, and they don't look at it. So once you become a targeted individual, once you become a suspect in a terrorist plot or cheating on someone's wife, evidently, in some cases that I've read about, they then will, I'm just kidding, but if you're targeted as a terrorist, that's when they now have the authority to go through that data and see who you're talking to and what you're saying and the different information that's contained in your emails and what websites that you're looking at and things like that, who you're talking to, and make their various connections to other people. So if you're talking to Bob down the street, well, now Bob's a suspect because you're a suspect, and they can look at all his information, and there's a system of jumps that they can make. The information escapes me because I didn't look at it directly before the show, but I digress again. So so they've got a constitution, we've got a constitution, and that kind of goes against the Fifth Amendment, and the way they skirt that through the Patriot Act is they don't look at it until you're a suspect. So this is, in this presentation that I was reading from this gentleman from India, they have a particularly alarming section of law that's called Section 66A. And this section states that you can be jailed for up to 3 years for sending an email that, quote, causes annoyance or inconvenience, end quote. And this is said to be used as protection from harassment. So you can imagine the vagueness of that law would make any freedom-loving individual a little nervous because it could be interpreted in any number of different ways, and in fact it is. And this presentation gives several examples of how various politicians are using this law to jail dissidents that are, in one example, it was this person had been attacked by the ruling political party, and he used his email service to send like a spoof, like a joke, like a cartoon about the ruling political party to someone else, and the political party went to the police, filed a report, and that person was arrested. So it is, in fact, being used to silence dissidents. And this is, part of some scary history that not only America has, but you think of the communist Russia and Nazi Germany and the ways that they were able to move their agendas forward by silencing anybody that would contest that. So here's an article. I went to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. They've got a website. Again, these are the people that are kind of the advocates for the citizens to kind of protect their rights on the internet and in various forms of electronic communication. Here's the title of the article: Top Technologists file briefs supporting top technologists file briefs supporting ACLU lawsuit against NSA spying. EFF represents computer scientists in explaining why, quote, it's not just metadata, end quote. So they're outlining a group of computer scientist specialists that have put together what's known as a brief to file with a lawsuit that the ACLU has against the NSA concerning the various spying programs, and much of that information was released by whistleblower Edward Snowden. Here's some of the article. Representing a large group of top computer science experts and professionals, the Electronic Frontier Foundation today submitted a brief to a federal appeals court supporting the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, lawsuit over the NSA's mass call record collection program. At the core of the brief is the argument that metadata matters, and basically the argument from the NSA is that they don't actually collect the content of your emails, they collect who it goes to, and it goes into that further in the article. I'll read that now. Intelligence officials have often downplayed privacy concerns over the NSA's interpretation of Section 215 of the Patriot Act by stating that the agency does not collect the content of calls, but only the metadata. Who a person called, when, how long the conversation lasted, and other information. EFF's brief begins with the line, "It's not just metadata," and goes on to explain how metadata collection on a massive scale can often reveal more personal information about an individual than content. The brief outlines how metadata can show patterns of behavior, political and religious affiliations, and other personal details, especially when combined with other data sources. So that's basically another caveat that the NSA is taking, say, well, we're not actually looking at, you know, the content of your email to your mother back east. We're just seeing who you're talking to, how long you're talking, blah, blah, blah. And their objection to this, the EFF's objection to this is, well, now if you take that information and you combine it with, you know, maybe either Facebook groups or the various affiliations with politicians and what they're doing in that, then it forms a pretty complete picture of what this person's up to, and a pretty full profile of about the person, more so than necessarily just metadata on would entail by saying we're just looking at, you know, who you're talking to. So to go on with the article, metadata equals surveillance. The security experts and EFF board member Bruce Schneier, another signer of the brief. It's who we talk to, what we read, and where we go. When the president says, "Don't worry, it's only metadata," what he's really saying is that you're all under surveillance. And that's true. As we pointed out, this is highly intrusive and really goes against everything that the Constitution was basically set out to do to protect our various rights, you know, to memorialize the rights that we were bestowed by our Creator, be that, you know, your mom or God or whoever, you know, you consider your Creator to be. So that's disturbing. Here are some more headlines, and this is kind of the current mood of how this information is being, how these different programs are being called into criticism, how they're being rebuffed, how you know, where we're at right now with this. And these are more headlines from firstlook.org, and that's, of course, Glenn Greenwald's website that he's using to expose some of the Edward Snowden stuff. The first headline: the White House has been covering up the presidency's role in torture for years. And of course, this is some of the recent headlines that I'll get into in some of in the rest of this presentation. Here's another article headline: Foreign officials in the dark about their own spy agencies cooperating with the NSA. And we heard some of that. We heard about how the various intelligence gathering institutions around the world, for instance, the USA, the CIA can't necessarily look into the data of Americans, and the British intelligence can't look into the information of the British people, but what they can do is share that information, and then the British people can give the CIA information that they're getting from spying on Americans, and the CIA can give the British people, the British intelligence officers, information about what the British people are. So, long story short, that information is still being shared. They're still knowing what we're doing, and they're just using wacky loopholes to be able to get around that. Here is another title to an article here: CIA search of Congressional Computer Sparks Constitutional Crisis. Now, if you're familiar with this, it is the recent the recent what came about with Dianne Feinstein, and she is, of course, an overseer on some of these various intelligence agencies. Apparently, the CIA went through and snooped the computers of the people who are supposed to be overseeing the intelligence agencies. So they've basically got information on what their oversight committee is up to, the various things that they're investigating, you know, what direction, you know, if the CIA has holes in their infrastructure, they can use this information to seal it up, or they can destroy information that they don't want to be called into court under, you know, some type of court order. It basically gives them a look at the oversight committee's cards, you know, before they're laid out on the table. So that leads into the next article title: Calls for Brennan's ouster emerge along with details of CIA search of Senate computers. So now, because of this, the director, the CIA director, Brennan, is his job's being threatened, and I think that's important, because now we're getting to the meat of it. You've got the two separate agencies that are kind of going after each other, and of course I've got my suspicions about any politician. So if they're going after the CIA and the CIA is going after them, then, you know, I can't really see where it's damaging me at all, and I'd like to see what they all uncover, because basically I think they both need to be investigated, but that's for another show as well, and I digress. Here are some more headlines from firstlook.org. How the NSA plans to infect millions of computers with malware. Now, this is what I was referring to before when I said prior to the Patriot Act, if they had a targeted individual, they needed a warrant, they needed a court order to gather information on this person. You'd have a team of several people that were focused on one person, and they'd work in tandem to gather data on this person, which was more resource intensive, we'll say, because now you're paying, you know, several people to spy on one person. So after the Patriot Act and they were able to do mass data surveillance, then they started utilizing technology to where just a few people could basically spy on dozens, and given the content of this article, potentially millions. And here's some information from the article. In some cases, the NSA is masqueraded as a fake Facebook server, using the social media site as a launching pad to infect the target's computer and exfiltrate files from a hard drive. In other words, it has sent out spam emails laced with malware, which can be tailored to covertly record audio from a computer's microphone and take snapshots with its webcam. The hacking systems have also enabled the NSA to launch cyber attacks by corrupting and disrupting file downloads and denying access to websites. Well, that is atrocious. They've basically gone the path of the black hat, you know, gone on to the dark side to do some really shady stuff that I'm not sure that the American people would agree with. I'm positive that the American people wouldn't agree with. How they've got access to this through Facebook, it calls, that corporation into question. And I know that there are, hundreds of millions. I think there's probably close to 1 billion people that use Facebook. So that's a very dangerous vector to be vulnerable from. I'll go on with the article here. Mikko, an expert in malware who serves as chief research officer at the Finnish security firm F-Secure, calls the revelations disturbing. The NSA surveillance techniques, he warns, could inadvertently be undermining the security of the Internet. When they deploy malware on systems, he goes on to say, they potentially create new vulnerabilities in these systems, making them more vulnerable for attacks from a third party. So basically, what he's saying there is that as they install this malware on your computer, not only are you vulnerable to them for surveillance, anyone that's familiar with this malware, or possibly through a port scan or various other network penetration techniques, they might also be able to access your microphone and access your webcam and collect very personal data on you that way. And that's a very valid objection, and that's a very valid complaint, because that's our worst nightmare, is it not? Of course, I'm use the Southern security method. I've ripped the adhesive part off of a Post-it note, and I've got it taped over my the webcam that's built into my netbook. But people like my mother, my grandmother, my neighbors that aren't necessarily, haven't studied security, for years and years, that they may not be aware that this is even possible. People's children have iPads and various devices that have cameras built into them, and that's creepy. That's horrible. That's opening that up to a third party who could be anybody, just so you can get maybe some information that you might be able to use on a target that you could be interested in, is vulgar. It's a vulgar abuse of power, and I'll be happy to see this end soon. I'll go on with the article here. The system has been operational in some capacity since at least July 2010, and its role has become increasingly central to the NSA hacking operations. Earlier reports based on the Snowden files indicate that the NSA has already deployed between 85,000 and 100,000 of these implants against computers and networks across the world, with plans to keep on scaling up those numbers. So this is what the implant is. It's mentioned in the article. The implant is the actual piece of software, like the Trojan, the backdoor, the server that they would install on your computer to give them access to it whenever it's convenient for them to come in and turn on your webcam and watch you walk around your bedroom or whatever. So that's what an implant is. The article goes on, the intelligence community's top secret black budget for 2013 obtained by Snowden lists Turbine, which is the name for the various implants and the system utilized to keep track of them. And as I read the article, what they're basically trying to do is extend what we were talking about with the pre-Patriot Act, where it was, a court order of 5 people watching one target, to post-Patriot Act with a few people watching dozens, perhaps hundreds of people, to perfecting this system in a way that it actually functions like a brain. And that's the terminology that they used in the article, that the much of the various decisions made on what type of software would be involved, it would be installed, who to install it on. Much of these decisions are automated now by this system called Turbine. And so the article goes on, lists Turbine as part of a broader NSA surveillance initiative called, quote, owning the net, end quote. Owning something, if you're not into the, security vernacular, you would own a computer. And what that means is that you have full control over it. You basically have admin or root privileges, and you can change passwords. You can obviously turn on cameras and microphones. You basically, it's your computer. You can do with it what you want. You own it. So by naming the initiative, owning the net, what the NSA agency has done is they are promoting their intention of turning the internet into a spying tool. And that's, if you're a conspiracy researcher, that's one of our greatest fears, is that this is actually just a tool that's being used to collect data and compile it in a storage bunker somewhere that they can come after us whenever. Of course, there's various degrees of woo with that. Of course, I don't think somebody like me will necessarily be a target, but depending on how effective I become, or how interested they are in snatching up the low-hanging fruit, there's no telling, and effectively, as is just mentioned in chat, we all are targets at that point. They're basically utilizing every avenue of communications that we use to use against us in a way. So we've got the propaganda on one side, which uses the various media outlets to tell us what to think, to try and produce various behaviors, be it through advertising and purchasing products, through various political motivations, things like that. Now they've got the censor part of that, which is now they can tell how effective it is. They can tell what we're doing. They can track us and see what we're up to, and that basically, anything that pushes an electron is now basically against the human race and any type of free thinking that you can come up with. So that's the end of my presentation. I've got some speculation that I'd like to give. Hopefully, I'm not boring everyone and trying to stay on point here. And the next part of my the next place I'd like to take the show is into some speculation on what I believe that they're doing with this information, because we know how they're collecting it, we know where they're putting it, we know, thanks to people like Edward Snowden and the various whistleblowers before him, we're becoming more aware of the infrastructure that's around us that's being used to spy on us. So basically, I've been trying to think about, and talking to other people, this isn't completely my theory. I've actually read much of this in some of the early cyberpunk books from like the 80s. They brilliantly predicted that some of this activity would be happening in the future. I'm sure that in some aspects it was already in the think tanks and maybe even on the ground in various other forms. And what this speculation amounts to is, if you recall, when I was listing off the various the various companies and the various software programs that they were using to that the CIA, the In-Q-Tel, the CIA-funded corporation that they were interested in and they were steering and that they were helping out with, one of those was predictive software. And that's kind of the base of my theory here, is that they've got algorithms and models and various, we saw early examples of this with what was considered profiling. They create a profile on someone by collecting all of this data, and the fuller you can make that profile, the more information that you can obtain about the person, the more you can understand what's going on in their head, then the more effective it is at predicting, your activities. The more effective it is at knowing what you're going to do a step or two before you take it. And this is very I forget the movie, but they had the predictive crimes unit, and we've seen some examples of this. There was a judge that had a case that I forget the outcome of the case, but he said that they had accurately predicted that this criminal was going to cause a crime, and therefore he was liable to be able to be convicted of this crime. And thanks from the chat. The movie that I'm talking about is Minority Report. Thank you, chat. And so basically, you've got this system that can accurately predict, what move you're going to make. And that's not a big deal for the average citizen. They have pretty static habits. They get up, they go to work, they come home from work, they go to the store, they watch some TV, drink a beer, do whatever, then go to sleep. It's that same thing. Maybe they do laundry, maybe they go for a walk, do their lawn, but it's the same pattern. But then you've got people who are political activists, you've got people who are working in the conspiracy theory realm that are trying to get to the bottom of some serious public safety issues. And these are probably closer to, and of course you've got your terrorists and your suspects of doing various nefarious happenings which is what all this falls under the umbrella of the war on terror and why they've got this out here. But unfortunately, we fall into that umbrella too. So as they're able to collect all this data, then I'm sure that they're able to and this is getting a little bit out there, but it never hurts to have, to let your imagination run as long as you can reel it back in. But the possibility is they're using these sense data. They're sensing where you're going, what you're doing. They're predicting, the probability of the outcome that your next step or two. Well, then they can take steps to influence that. Maybe they're make their presence known in a chat room or on a message board. That they're going to try and steer you in a direction or influence your thoughts or dissuade you from doing something that might uncover some information that they want to keep hidden without directly influencing you or arresting you or detaining you or Guantanamo baying you or vanning you or whatever the other billions of different methods that they have available to them. So I think that's what this is all building up to. And if it's not already in place, I think that this is predictive behavioral modeling is what they're up to, and trying to tell the future. And I think Minority Report was probably pretty accurate. So that's my spiel, ladies and gentlemen, and I appreciate you listening. I'm curious if we've got some people in chat that have some comments or if they have anything to say. I'm absolutely open at this point.
Thank you, Liberty. This is Nolo. I have a comment about you briefly touched on it, and it's called the Internet of Things, where the interconnectivity of all of our common household appliances. What they're saying with the IP version 6 now is that they could assign an IP address to every atom on the surface of the Earth and still have enough addresses left over to do another 100 plus Earths. Humans could easily assign an IP address to everything on the internet. Now, if you, say for instance, if you were a spy with your trench coat and your hat, spy versus spy, and you had your little round bomb on your coat, you wanted to find out if a country was going to war. There's a lot of legwork, there's a lot of buying beers at the tavern, there's a lot of this and that. Nowadays, you could sit at your computer terminal and check, for instance, payroll. How come there's a lot of overtime near the shipyards? How come there's overtime in the beryllium manufacturing plant, knowing that maybe that's a key ingredient to armor-piercing bullets? How come there's an increase of imports of, say, camouflage? And it wouldn't take long in the interconnectivity of things, all these data reports flowing in, to paint a picture of mobility, somebody going to war. It wouldn't take any kind of spying whatsoever, just a simple pie chart and somebody with a knowledge of logistics and supply lines and such, and know, hey, something's going on here. The same thing can be applied, say, for instance, to the smart meters that they're hooking up to, forcing in some cases, to people's houses. The Google buying up a lot of interest in the smart thermostat technology after their electric meter failed. But still, their hands in the game where they're collecting data, just like Google Earth. They want a picture of every square inch of Earth. You correlate, say, the electric usage in your home, when your refrigerator runs the most, when you open and close it, how long your TV's on. Of course, it's monitoring what stations you're watching, what commercials you flip through. The obvious overt type spying, like taking control of your computer and your camera and your when your house is wired for burglar alarm, and essentially you have that entire network of cameras open to anyone who wants to look into it. And so it's not just you surveilling for your own safety, it's you're being surveilled by their safety. And when everything from an electric razor to your refrigerator to your car to your camera, whenever you hook it in, your cell phone, all these things we can see. Just for an example, in Iran, when they stuck in Stuxnet. Now, this kind of microprocessing is simple. You know, we consider it to be idiots. It's turn the motor on, run to so many RPMs, level at such and such. Well, if you can virus infect them to play Thunderstruck and all spin the motors at destructive speed, you know, remotely, well, you can see what would happen if you were in your car and they decided you were a suspect. They would just either have the car pull over or just simply stop. All of these things, all of this interconnectivity is the you know, people can complain about the upfront damage of surveillance, but if I can paint a picture of your habits in your house from your electric uses, I mean, this is pretty much like a dolphin can paint a picture with sonar and get a pretty good idea that we would translate visually. So too can all these microprocessors and all of their functions and all paint a picture of exactly what you're doing in your home. Not least of which is what corporations are doing. You know, all of their comings and goings and dealings, and you know, are the lawyers being alerted? How many emails are flowing back and forth between a certain, say, patent office? How many, you know, how much is your telecommunications, your cell phone uses risen during such and such spikes during the stock market? All of these things paint probably a more complete picture of your overall patterns of behavior than this, you know, overt I'm reading your email.
Absolutely. I've got some information on the IPv6 for people who may not know this, may not be involved in the technology field quite as much. I know Nolo is. The IPv6 is it was basically the Internet Protocol version 4, which is the version that most of us are familiar with. Your 198.162. You know, the I guess it's 12 digits that make up an IP address. We were running out of those. So what they did was implement a new system, and that's Internet Protocol version 6, and it uses kind of a hash format, which is a lot more numerical places and different ways that they're able to address the various computers on the internet. So they basically would never run out of addresses again to get ahead of, you know, any potential bottlenecks in the future. And what, for instance, Microsoft was able to do is now some of the limitations that you may be aware of on a computer network inside of your house. You've got a local internet, you've got a local IP, which is, I think it's a 192.168 prefix, or you could be on a different subnet, which is 10.0.0.1, but that's not necessarily accessible on the other side of your router or your modem, which is where you're given an internet IP address, and that's, you know, anything above 192 and various iterations from there. So what the IPv6 does is now every computer on your internal network has its own IP address, and one of the ways that this was implemented is through systems before Microsoft purchased Skype. They had I think it was NetMeeting, something like that, and it was a piece of software for conferencing and having business meetings and video conferencing and things like that. They implemented the IPv6 to be able to utilize different computers on the same network, on a local network, have that translate to match an ID that they kept on their server at Microsoft. So if you dialed in on a local computer with the IPv6, it would know that that computer address is tied to this ID, and it would basically make the connection more secure. And as Nolo pointed out, this has every type of concern because now, like on a network with hundreds and thousands of computers, instead of being hidden by the mask that the router provides, now you are individually identifiable by this new form of protocol. And to add to what Nolo was saying, that there's the active surveillance, which are the implants that the NSA uses to actively surveil the activity on your computer, pull files and delete stuff and put stuff there. And then, of course, the passive surveillance, which is, seeing that, for instance, as the smart meter is a perfect example. Maybe at night you would normally have your electrical usage drop off because you're not watching TV, your computer's turned off, the refrigerator isn't being opened and shut, you're not doing laundry. These are various forms of activity that would utilize this electricity that would indicate that everyone's either gone or asleep. Now, if that activity is happening 24 hours a day, then it's obvious that there's at least more than one person at that house. So now they have just identified, unless you're using automation, home automation stuff, but that's neither here nor there. The specific example is now they know that if there's one person that has their name on a lease at an apartment, now they know that there's more than one person there, and they can customize their various surveillance techniques towards that. So that's very powerful information and an excellent insight on that, Nolo. I appreciate it. I'm curious if there's anyone else that would like to make a comment or ask a question.
I got a comment. This is Tiny. I'm listening to everything you guys are saying, and you guys may know it as a panel, but I don't think the American public understands how the Department of Defense and how our government uses the word collect. Because when I was reading up on everything Snowden put out there, it says that our government uses the word collect not for everything it really and truly collects about us, but only for the things it admits to reading and looking at. So when they're saying they've collected millions and millions of things, that's what they've looked at. In other words, like if I collect books, the only ones that count as collected are the ones I read, according to our government. That's how they consider collecting data on us, is what they look at, not what they store in a bank somewhere. And that really bothered me, because how much information do they have then? Thank you.
Yeah, it's disturbing that they've used the legalese to define the various things, because exactly as you said, that this is what we've looked at. When we can almost be assured at this point that there are millions of people's information that they've gathered, but as they say, they as you said, they only have to admit to what they've collected if they've actually looked at it, and that's another snarky little loophole that unfortunately is allowing for the wholesale abuse of the system, which is, in my opinion, completely against the Constitution, and it's all afforded by the Patriot Act, which I thought we were going to get rid of, but unfortunately we haven't. That's an excellent point. I appreciate you pointing that out, Tiny. Again, I kind of skipped over the station ID here. This is LOP Radio. we're doing a show on the American surveillance state. This is Liberty, your host, and I do appreciate you listening, and we will archive this program afterwards. It'll take a little while to get it converted and put up, assuming that the NSA isn't slowing down my processor by watching me on my video cam. Just kidding. And I think that we have a comment from Entropy, and if you'd like to go ahead and make that comment now, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is the result of not only a severe overreaction to what we term as terrorism. You know, this goes along with companies lobbying the government to create these policies so that they can sell their technology to the government for this use, et cetera, et cetera. These agencies are simply out of control and they need to be reeled in. We create federal agencies and give them so many powers to use. Though we very rarely audit those agencies or bring them back in to see how they're using those powers. When one of the three branches of government does something, there's a system of checks and balances in place to make sure that that stays within the realm of the Constitution. Usually that works. Sometimes it doesn't, but usually that works. To me, it's also lazy law enforcement because there is not a signed judge in this nation that if there was an immediate threat to multiple lives in this country would not sign an order in the dead of night or give a verbal okay on it and say you'll get the paperwork tomorrow. It's simply a way for people in power to have more power. It's unconstitutional, and we need to shred this. Thanks for a very thorough and very informative discussion on the topic.
Yeah.
No problem. And, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nolo.
No, it was a comment, spinning off of what Entropy said. It seems to me that this data collection point is a course for some sort of control. And the easiest form of control I can see, especially with how in-depth this surveillance is, it's almost like, well, there's nobody that's particularly innocent. And along with the propensity of the government to pass more and more laws, I mean, such a tangled network, it's like you're driving in your car and your GPS in collusion with your Bluetooth, whatever, communication tool in your car, notices that you're actually in a school zone, but your car is actually going 40 miles an hour above that speed limit and decides to turn you in. Or it just kind of puts it in a back pocket next time it needs to have a talk with you. And so on and so forth. It checks your library. If you use such things, what books have you checked out? This seems to establish some kind of subversive, suspicious pattern of books that you're reading, or any number of things. How many times you went to your pharmacy for what's that drug for? That sort of collection type thing, so that everyone is basically guilty of something. And to have this much a mass of data, what are the odds they don't have something on you through some of these telltale sensors, reporting on all your activities, how come your car parked out of so-and-so's house and didn't leave until morning? How come when you reported in sick for work, and that's what went on your timesheet, actually we have a record of you logging in at the fairways at the golf club? How come, et cetera, et cetera. And with that kind of leverage on people, I think that may be used as a form of power on manipulating what they want out of people. It's the old lean on them and say, well, you wouldn't want your neighbor to find out this, would you? Sign here, or vote here, or go there, or any number of coercive type things. This is the power that I fear, is the power of some sort of, blackmail, collusion, some sort of overall social manipulation where we're all guilty of some sort of thing or another and don't want to come underneath the scrutiny of either some kind of Gestapo organization like the IRS or any number of alphabet soup agencies looking you over. It's that sort of erosion of freedom that's very alarming.
I absolutely agree. And to add to that, basically what they're doing here is they're utilizing what computers are, and that's a form of automation. And they've realized that they can cut some costs and utilize the computers to do what the actual manpower does. And the manpower, if you have human eyes on something, that it's less prone to failure for the most part, especially when discussing the government. But utilizing the automation, they're able to exponentially increase their reach and the size of the net that they can cast across people, and the various things that they're able to keep an eye on. And yeah, I mean, disturbing, horrifying, disgusting, and vulgar are the least describing terms that I can use to paint this with, because it's just it's a conspiracy theorist and a critical thinkers and a public safety researcher's worst nightmare to know that on the other side of your computer screen there's somebody that's waiting for a red light to show up with your name next to it, that you're doing some type of subversive activity, and they need to go pull your file, and everything going back 10 or 20 years they're able to access at the drop of a hat, and there's absolutely no rules that prevent it. And that's a horrible abuse of power, and it's a really disgusting direction for the country to be taking. So unless there's any more comments, if there are, pipe up in chat, and I'll we'll let you holler real quick. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. This is Liberty. This is LOP Radio, and we're affiliated with the forum lunaticoutpost.com, and there's always some meaningful conversations on there, some fun and friendly people that you can go there and talk to, and we'd love to see you there. We definitely appreciate everybody's support that we've had. We've got our 1-year anniversary for LOP Radio doing talk shows coming up tomorrow on March 17th. I think we're trying to plan something special here, and what that's probably going to amount to, depending on how special you think it is or not, we're probably going to run a marathon of all of our previous shows, and give maybe some of the new listeners a chance to check out some of the work that we've done, the various guests that we've had, the Stanton Friedmans, the Jim Mars, the various panels. So our very first set of shows were panel discussions that we hope you would find interesting. We love what we do. This is a passion for us, and we appreciate the support that we've had from everyone for the last year, and we hope to see you enjoy our work for the years to come, and hopefully will help support us there too. Coming up next weekend, this is March 23rd, next Sunday, we've got a guest, Michael Cremo, I believe. He's involved in forbidden archaeology, and I think that's going to be a very interesting show, and I'm really excited about that. And I think we'll have that'll be a LopVox live show with the host, the Ghost Scientist, that will be hosting that one. And that about does it for us here at LOP Radio. I appreciate you guys listening, and we will talk at you later.